Morning, everyone. Welcome to our third webinar on organisational resilience. I really appreciate you all making the time to attend this workshop. I hope everyone is still keeping well and keeping safe. For those in South Africa, I hope you are nice and warm today, as it's been really cold in Cape Town. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. For those of you returning, I've received so many WhatsApp messages and LinkedIn contacts and emails, so thank you for the interactions. I love how we can keep this debate going and how much interest there is in this. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. If you could please keep your microphones on mute, and then as we go along the session, there's a Q&A bit on the right-hand side. So if you have any comments or questions as we go along, you can just put the Q&A, put it there for us as we go through the session. Right, my name is Nadine Rix. I'm the National Risk Officer for BDO in South Africa. Today's workshop is going to be a little bit different from the others. I'm going to try and make it a bit more interactive, and I'm very lucky to have lovely production ladies in the background that will help me with it. We've got Londiwe in Joburg, Justine in Cape Town, and Debbie in Durban that will be helping me out as we go along today. So I know how precious a commodity time is at the moment. And I also know how flooded the market is with information. I'm not sure what all of your experience has been with all of the online content that is out there. And sometimes I feel after a great webinar, like, oh, it was great, but I'm so overwhelmed with everything that I've heard. So today, what we'd like to do is, aside from just learning about business development and learning about resilience, we're going to be developing our own business development goals and action plans as we go along the session. I'll take you through it step by step, so that when you leave here today, you not only hopefully have learned something, but you also know how to apply it when you go back to work. I've always found that, you know, the shorter the distance is between learning something new and then taking action on it, the more successful you become. So I'm going to do a quick recap on some of the stuff we spoke on in the previous session, and then we're going to get right stuck into it. So many of you will at this point in time be familiar with our resilience framework. It consists of the three foundations. The first one is data. So we look at data in terms of what the organization needs to collect. We look at different areas. Last week we looked at strategy and leadership. Today we look at business development. So we go through what is the kind of data that you need to collect, how do you have to collect it, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be stored safely and securely, and it needs to conform to certain standards to make the analytics, you know, better, if we can put it like that. Systems, which is the next element of the resilience framework, is then how the business interacts with this data. Here we explore elements of information flow, business analytics, what communication systems we have in place, and really building an agile and adaptable organization as we use our systems more effectively. The last element then explores trust. So trust is the relationships we have internally and externally, and questions the commitment of people to our overall goals. We look at how conflicts are managed, how we hold each other accountable, and establishing trust through the sharing of vulnerabilities and shared values. So that is just the framework in its essence. If you want more details on it, you know, last week we did go through each of the elements in a bit more detail. So feel free to check out that webinar on our website. Last week we looked at strategy and leadership. And today we're going to be looking at business development. So if you'd like to just help me out to get a bit of a better understanding of who I'm dealing with and who I'm talking to in the audience, business development means a lot of things to a lot of people in a lot of organizations. It can mean anything from an increase in sales to an increase in market share, to improve quality. And I would imagine that in each of your organizations, you would define business development in terms of one of these things. So I'm going to ask you if you could pick one of them, maximum two, on what you would define business development as. So in your experience and the way that you view it, if I could ask you to pick one, either A, which is increase in sales, B, increase in market share. C, improved quality. D is the expansion then of products and services. E is improved customer service, and F is increased efficiency. So if you can go to the Q&A section and just input for me what you would say business development is. So I'm going to quickly go to our team session and then see from our audience, what do you think is business development? All right. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to put it in for me on the side in your Q&A. Londi, I'm not sure if you guys, there we go. I've got C and E, A and F. I've got an A coming through, a D coming through. Right, couple of more A's. So it looks like increase in sales is quite a popular one. Another A and E. Okay. Right. Another A coming through. Okay. All right, so a bit of a mix. So it looks like A and E, D is in there. F is not really an option, so that's good to know. Right, so a lot of focus on sales, but quite a wide mix. So we can see it's very much dependent on, you know, the kind of organization that we're in. Here comes the E and the F, A, D and F, D and E. Right, so nice wide mix. Thank you very much for including your options on that. It's just for me to kind of see where we are and who we're talking to on the other side without being able to see you face to face. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each and every one of those just so that we can have a good understanding of, you know, the various ways in which we can actually develop our business. So if we look at the first one, which is increase in sales. So increase in sales can pretty much be done in three simple ways. You're either going to sell more, so you're going to sell more to your existing client base, looking at giving them more products and services. You're either going to sell two more, which means that you're going to increase your customer base, and then sell four more means that you increase the price. So in very simple terms, that's how we typically then grow our business, through increased in sales. The next one, we look at increasing our market share. So market share here, we look at our potential market. Obviously, we need to be concerned with our customers, because without our customers, we would have nothing. We would have no business to develop. So we look at our potential market, that are all the people that could be interested in the product. The available market is those that have enough money to buy the product. Quantified available market are those who can legally buy and use the product. A target market, this is then where we decide this is who we want to target. This is our audience that we're going for. And our penetrated market is then those in our target market that have already bought our products and services. So if we look at expanding in our current market or increasing our market share, it means literally taking, you know, business away from our competitors. That's what we want to do. And the size of the market is never fixed as our laws change. I mean, in South Africa on last week, we had the alcohol ban again. We still got the ban on cigarettes. So, you know, if you were in those markets, all of a sudden overnight, that market kind of disappeared. It also depends on how populations grow. The company can change its pricing in response to market needs. And then also if they identify opportunities to reach new customers by entering new markets, that's also a gateway for unlocking some opportunity. Typically, how we increase our market share, you know, we can look at mergers and acquisitions, increase in sales. We can look at increasing our geographical presence. So that's increase in market share. When we look at improved quality, excuse me, quality essentially, it focuses on bringing better quality of products and services to our customers. So the theory goes that if we improve our quality, people will more likely tell other people about this experience that they've had with us. So through word of mouth, we can grow our customer base. And then over time, if people do experience us of having a premium quality, they should also be likely to pay a premium price. So by quality, we can look at then how to measure our quality. That's quite an important factor. And it also implies that the organization is willing to learn. So we look at quality, we look at how to improve it, we see what works, we see what doesn't work, and we learn as we improve on our quality. Expansion. So expansion literally means if you're going to enter a completely new market. So you would jump from one market into another. We've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years, especially in the tech sector, with typically a voice provider like MTN going into data and now going into money. So, you know, it typically happens through a lot of collaborative efforts. If you see there's a gap in a market and you see a partner that you want to collaborate with, you can go into that market. And then also innovation, which was kind of the buzzword last year when people wanted to expand their product and service offering. Customer service, very similar to quality, looks at, again, experiencing fantastic customer service. Hopefully then people again would tell other people about this customer service. You need to be very, very well versed in what your customer needs are so that you can tailor the service to them. And then again, the measurement component is very important. If we can't measure our customer service, it's very difficult to say, you know, how do we invest in it and how do we improve upon it? And then the last one, operational efficiency. Similar to that, we look at any kind of like blockages that could get our products and service to the market. Again, we need to have the business needs. So what does the business need from operations to ensure that the products and service can get delivered? And again, also the measurement component to see how we can improve upon this. So all of these things are very, very valid ways in which we can grow and develop our business. And it depends very much on the organization, how we do that. And as we can see, many of you have different experience in that. But if we look at the definition of business development, I quite like this one. It says that business development is the creation of long-term value, which implies it's linked to the purpose of the organization. And it does it from customers, markets, and relationships. So if we look at the long-term value, like I said, it's linked to the purpose. Yes, it can relate to cash as money, because money is the lifeblood of any business, but it can also be things like status, quality, accessibility, reputation, any aspect through which the company seeks to grow. It's about creating those opportunities for value to persist over the long time, creating something where value can flow indefinitely, not just for a short space of time. Relationships, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat this morning. Relationships, then, I mean, we can agree that any successful business development effort relies on strong relationships. This is where we come to our organizational why, building, managing, and leveraging relationships that are based on trust, respect, mutual appreciation of each other's values is fundamental to enabling the flow of value over the long term. We need people who believe in what we believe, and we consistently need to act and deliver products and services in line with that. Relationships with our partners, customers, employees, and suppliers are all critical to the success of any business development effort. So now that we've gained a little bit more an understanding or a foundation of what is business development, the next question I'm going to ask you similarly to go back to your Q&A. And this time I'm going to ask you, in your organization, what is business development typically driven by? So it can be your customer needs, it can be a leader that's very dedicated to growth. It can be pure money. People just want to make more money. I think in recent events, maybe external changes has forced us to relook at how we actually develop our business in this environment. Size of the business, sometimes smaller businesses tend to grow a little bit as cash becomes available, whereas large businesses go quickly for mergers and acquisitions. So if you can just in your Q&A for me, again, choose between A, B, C, D, E, and F. In your organization, what is business development typically driven by? What drives it? I'm going to go to the Q&A and see what we've got in there. Okay. Right, A and E, A and B. I got an F in there as well. Let's have a look. Lots of A's, customer needs, I love that. B, external changes. Okay, A, B, and E. Money, yes, money does remain the lifeblood. C, leadership. Oh, that's a nice one as well. Okay, so a little bit of a mix again, which is great. B, C, and E. B, external, leadership, and money. I think Jerry has kind of summed up where we find ourselves at the moment in COVID. External changes forcing the business to grow us, leaders kind of stepping up and saying we've got to do it, and money, we need to survive in this time. So business development, we can see, is also driven by many different things. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do a bit of a case study. I quite like learning through case study. So if you have a pen and paper with you, I'm going to ask you to join me on this journey. Like I said, we're going to teach you a little bit about how to do goal setting and action plans. So I'm going to do this through a case study, and then hopefully when you leave here, you'll have something concrete that you can take back to work with you. So today we're going to look at Handy Dan. Last week we looked at retail, and this week I decided to take a services company. They do anything from bathroom to kitchen repairs. They've got about 100 staff, and they operate, let's say, from 3 small warehouses in Cape Town. They would use these warehouses then to build, let's say, custom-made cupboards or what it is they need. They use it to store their equipment, and sometimes they also have meetings there. Now, for Handy Dan, due to the events of the last 6 months, they're cash-strapped, they've lost some clients, they're struggling to keep their workforce employed. I'm sure a lot of us can see ourselves in that situation, but yet they've made the bold decision to grow the business back to what it was pre-pandemic levels. So they want to grow the business back to what it was, let's say, in February. The owners they're very passionate about what they do. They love, improving people's homes and their living space. And they believe there is a market for what they do. So as I said, while I go through the example, you can either use this goal with me as we go through the model, or if you would at this point in time like to set your own business development goal for yourself, feel free to write that down, and then I'm going to take you through a model that again helps us to give simplicity to this complex environment that we're in. So it's a step-by-step process that helps us to systematically go through everything we need to consider when we set our business development goals. Right. So I'm going to go through what we call the GROW model. Some of you might be familiar with this model. It's quite popular in coaching, but I like it as it gives structure to this very complex conversations that we're having. So the first one, the G, obviously speaks to the goal that we have to set. The second one is realities. So when we look at the realities, we ask questions around what would happen to this organization if the goal is not achieved? What would happen to staff morale if it's not achieved? Does the organization need to change anything or give up anything to achieve this goal? Are there practical limitations, for example, lack of resources, lack of space, movement limitations, any practical limitations that could hamper the achievement of this goal? Are there any other things that could block the achievement of it, and what actions do they need to take to limit these things? We look at, what is really going on the ground, the realities of the situation. Next one, then we look at options. So this is where we get really creative with a bit of brainstorming. This is where we do scenario analysis and things like that. And the last one is then the who, what, when. So that is the GROW model, as you can see it there. So before we move on into the practical application of this in the case of Handy Dan, is there anybody that has questions around this model? I need to just quickly make sure that we understand it. I'm going to quickly go back to our Q&A to see, before we get stuck into the details, if there's anybody here that has a question. Londi, do we see anything?
Hi, Nadine, there is a question.
Okay. What have we got here? Okay. So this question is, what if I do not know all of the realities in my environment? Okay. That's quite a good question. So ways in which we can kind of try and understand the realities is by looking at, our SWOT analysis. We look at what our competition is doing. We look at our customer profiles and things like that. But oftentimes it is difficult to get an understanding of these realities. In my experience, as much as you possibly can, if you can trust the people that work for you to come forward with some of these realities. If I can think of an example, when I worked in Nigeria, there was an internet service provider that was based in South Africa, and they entered the Nigerian market, and they decided to use the billing system and the exact model that they use in South Africa, and they implemented that in Nigeria. Now, typically in South Africa, you would buy a subscription, you would pay on a monthly basis, and that would be how the model works. And what they failed to understand is people and their staff in Nigeria were telling them, and managers were telling them, listen, this isn't going to work. The reality of what's going on here is it's cash-based. Nobody does subscriptions. It's not going to work. They chose not to listen to them. They rolled it out. And what happened was, so people would come and pay for the first month. And then, in the second month, they just wouldn't pay, but nobody would cut them off. And in 4 months' time, they would eventually be cut off because the business realized, these people are never going to come and pay. So when these people then came and said, oh, can you please reconnect me? They were like, oh, but you owe us 4 months of money. And they were like, well, I didn't ask you to keep me connected. I only paid for a month. The fact that you gave me additional months, that's not on me. So they had to go through a massive rehaul in terms of how they do their billings, how they roll out their products. And at the end of the day, they developed a prepaid system, similar to prepaid airtime cards that we get. You could buy 10 minutes or 15 minutes of internet time, and they would sell it like that. And when your 15 minutes are finished, you'd simply be cut off. So people also wanted the flexibility to choose how they spend their disposable income. This month, I might want internet. Next month, there's a soccer tournament on, and then I want to buy a TV subscription. So it was a massive learning curve and a lot of money spent unnecessarily if they'd only listened to people on the ground that knew what was going on. So I think in areas where you don't know the realities, really reach out to people who live there, who work there, who are in that industry, and ask the question and open yourself to knowing that we don't know everything. So I hope that answered that question sufficiently. Right, so let's go back to Handy Dan. So Handy Dan, if we look at their reality, so due to the events of the last 6 months, like I said, they're fairly cash strapped. The revenue's gone down by 60%. They had a strong balance sheet, but now it's not looking so great. Their customers have also been impacted. They had many in the hotel sector, which is now barely operating. A lot of their clients had offices, which they no longer need now due to service staff working remotely, and households simply decided to do a bit of DIY on their own. So not looking great there either. If we look at systems and technology, here we have a bit of an upside. They're lucky to have a very good CIO who's always been a fan of investing in automation. So they've got an excellent booking system, they've got an excellent equipment management system, and most of these have been developed in-house over the years that they grew their business. Staff is a bit of a concern. I think we can all agree that a lot of staff members at this point in time are suffering a bit with anxiety and stress. This has also been increased due to, restrictions of movement, limited social interaction. They do have good managers though. And I do think that if their managers keep on track and they keep checking in with their staff have shown that they have a willingness to learn, they want to learn new skills, and they want to actually also help the business grow. So those are some of the challenges that they're facing. I'm sure that many of you might be facing the same challenges at the moment. If I look back to, what is driving business development, that issue of money and survival, leadership is driving it. So at this point, I want to go back to the Q&A and ask, can anybody identify with some of these realities that they're facing? Are we experiencing this, or how has any of these things kind of limited your business development efforts? I'm sure you're here today to learn how to overcome this, but just let's quickly see if anybody out there are experiencing this or knows of challenges that they're facing. All right. Okay, it seems that we're all right. Okay. Oh wait, we've got one here. Okay. So this question is, due to travel restrictions, I can't see my team or meet with my clients. How do I grow my business if I can't be with my people? Yeah, that's a very good question. I think we're going to have to be really, really innovative in terms of how we connect with people. There's obviously online platforms and things like that, but I do think, you know, if we can make an effort to do face-to-face meetings, a lot of the teams that I've met with say, you know, it's video on, doesn't matter what you're wearing, doesn't matter whether you have your makeup on or not, you know, we want to see you. I've got Francis coming in, competition in the market. Yeah, the competition is fierce. And I think especially, you know, with competitors that have deeper pockets than we have, it's a tricky one. It's a really, really tricky one. So we can see that all of these things, we can at least agree on the fact that, yes, some of these things will hamper our business development efforts, which brings me back to why it's so important that we understand them, even if it's an uncomfortable conversation, even if it's uncomfortable to say, you know, our staff aren't coping, their anxiety is way high. It's not a nice thing to say. We need to really, really be honest about it, because otherwise we might go in the wrong direction when we look at the options that we have on the table. All right, so thank you for that. So these are some of the realities that Handy Dan has. We've got customer closing down, especially small businesses. Yes, yeah, it's really, really bad. When we look at customers now, as we go through the options, we're going to see maybe how we can work with our customers to maybe try and see them through these cash-strapped phases. There's no point in saying, you know, I want to grow my business by increasing sales, but half my customers are closing down. So that's why it's quite important to go through these realities. All right. Thank you for your comments on that. So what we're going to look at now when we look at options, we're going to look at each and every one of these. So capital and cash flow, obviously the first one. So this is where I'm going to bring back the resilience model. So for those of you that have documented your own business development goals, hopefully you've written down some of the realities. Some of you might be in this cash trap position. So what we're going to do now is to say, in terms of resilience, what do we need to do? So if they're cash strapped, they need data, first and foremost. They need to know their inflows and outflows. They need to be able to identify possible investors. Is there anybody out there that they could maybe combine their services with, or that's interested in, or that has deep pockets that could be interested in investing in their business? Interest rates in South Africa has come down quite significantly. So could they possibly enter a short-term loan or get some funding? And then repurposing of assets. So they have these warehouses, right? And if we look around us, you know, there's a lot of issues around us that maybe need space. So I know schooling, for example, has gone back every second day, but that means that parents who work have their kids at home every other day. So could they maybe repurpose these warehouses into daycare centers, or a place where kids can come in a safe environment and be, you know, kind of entertained? Can they possibly do something like that, where they would service the community and actually fill a need that's not typically in their original client base? We've seen a lot of hotels and conference centers that have been turned into hospitals and things like that. So could you possibly do the same then when you do have assets? Could you use them for something else? Systems and processes, they definitely need a financial management system. They need their eye on the budget all the time. They need to be able to do financial analytics. Any changes in interest rates or Forex that could influence them, they need to have their finger on the game there. And then debt management. We spoke earlier of, you know, clients running out of cash and closing down. So is there any way that maybe a client that can't pay them can pay them in terms of a barter? So is there something that the client does that could maybe help them? Or is there a service offering that client could maybe bring to the table, and then they can grow together? So here we got to get really, really creative when we look at our clients closing down and what skills are within those clients. The last one is then trust, critical component of the model. Here we look at the relationships with staff, relationships with banks, we need to be open and honest to say, this is our business plan. This is realistically what we're talking about. See if we can work on credit terms with our suppliers, and transparency is key. If the customers are going down, do we have that relationship with them where they can come to us and say, can we work on something together? So those are some of the options that we can look at when we look at capital and cash flow. Next one, we look then at our client base. So as I said, for customers that are cash strapped, can we do some sort of negotiations or barter deals? Can they expand into those client needs? One thing I was also thinking of, again, when we look at data, so how we need to know how our customers have been impacted, what sectors they're in, how they're coping, build those relationships, even though it's very, very tough. Customer needs. So let's say they serviced offices before. Those people who used to work in offices now, like most of us, probably have to work from home, and a lot of people don't have a home office. So can they maybe reach out to those employees who used to work in those buildings and say, hey, we can convert a space in your home, albeit a garage or an outhouse or something, into an office for you? Can they work creatively to now enter into that market? Because a lot of people don't have it. Or even some people might need a separate space to teach kids. So can they maybe convert a space in your home to teaching spaces? A lot of people have decided to homeschool. They're not sending their kids back. So really looking at their market and going, if we had an existing client base, how have they changed? And can we still maybe service some of those needs that have changed over time? Systems and processes, yeah, here we look at purchasing trends, what are going out there in the market, what are people buying at, the builders' warehouses of the world. Dedicated communications, nobody wants to be flooded with emails on the same topic. Some people respond better to WhatsApp, some want to be online. So do they have systems and processes that can keep that engagement with their clients going, and can they see those opportunities? And then with trust again, relationship with customers, real empathy and real connection is what we're really looking for. And in this one, I think, especially community projects, seeing the line of work that they're in. There might be schools that have been vandalized in this time. We've read it in the newspapers. So is there any way in which they can offer their services to the communities and build that trust and build that relationship, and hopefully through that gain some brand and some reputation to lead to some work? The next one we had is then innovate. So with innovation, they've got this great CIO and they've got the great tech side of the business. Now, they might not have previously considered going into the tech space, but if they have the skills, they might be silly not to. So here they can look at what new industries and technologies are developing, what's their competitors doing. Maybe their competitors are growing and they might need to have this booking system and equipment management system that has been developed. So is there a way in which they can actually grow their tech side, given the fact that they've got the skills there? On tech as well, with systems and processing, any kind of external changes, everyone's talking data privacy and data security. If they're going to go into that space, they need to be aware of any external changes that happen. Again, communication system is key. I've got Francis saying, yes, WhatsApp is a fantastic business tool. I agree 100%. I think it's great. I think we've stayed away from it for a long time, but it's a great tool, costs next to nothing, that we can utilize. Scenario analysis becomes very important here. And then while they grow this tech side, they need to make sure that their own business stays running. They can't just go off and do something and then leave the business behind. Trust, relationship with staff. The staff might get very anxious if all of a sudden they see this business now going into another sector. If I'm a painter or somebody that's waterproofing for roofs and now I hear everybody talking about apps and tech development, I could get very nervous. So they need to communicate with their staff and share with them. This is what we're doing. This is what we're trying. Those that want to collaborate with us, maybe there are staff members that are sitting with brothers and sisters or kids that can help them in this tech space. So that would be great. Possible collaborators, community support, again, reaching out to those that might just need a platform to showcase something great that they've developed, and then the sharing of ideas remains critical here. Innovate and create, here we come back to our people. First of all, people, if they're willing to be upskilled, let's trust that. Let's make sure that we get the word out there to say, if you have been a painter or a fitter or something, and you maybe did a graphics design course on the side, come on board. We want to use that. So here they need data in terms of the health and safety of their staff, paramount. You cannot do without that. They need to know their skills, their knowledge and their learning needs. So if somebody has a real passion for something, but they just haven't been able to develop that, now's the time to tap into it. How many of us have sat in restaurants where the waiters have massive degrees and qualifications, but they're putting themselves through school? So how many of your staff maybe has used this job to put themselves through school? They've got a real knack for something. So now's the time to maybe explore that and see how they can maybe help your business to grow. Critical alerts and monitoring. So coming back to if anybody does get sick, if anything changes in your staff environment, you need to be able to monitor that. We look here, especially if we're going to look at the innovating side of it, it needs to be agile. So instead of developing a project or product, testing it again, designing it, and eventually launching it, agile speaks to, before we even develop it, let's ask our customers, let's ask our suppliers what they think of it. As we develop it, then we go back to them with ideas. So it's a lot more interaction instead of having this waterfall methodology where you wait, deploy. Now it's kind of like a continuous loop where we go in and we check on each other all the time. Task management, very important. People need to know who needs to do what and by when they have to do it. So there can be a system in place to monitor that. And then trust, your team needs to be committed to the overall results. That's absolutely key. People might have different ideas about the business and where it needs to go, but at the end of the day, once the decision is made, we need everybody committed to that. We need to hold each other accountable as teams, as individuals. We need to be open to share ideas. So I need to feel that my idea might be crazy, but I'm going to share it. No one's going to laugh me off. No one's going to think it's crazy or silly. I feel open enough and I feel like I can be vulnerable enough to share in my teams. Otherwise, we're never going to get that good stuff out there. And then the freedom to innovate and create. This for me goes very much in line with not having strict deadlines and someone looking over your shoulder the whole time. We need to allow our people, if they have that creative knack, we need to allow space for them to do that in. So this is just a bit of the options that they can explore. So I'm hoping that those of you that have your own goals and your own realities, it can give you some ideas in terms of the options that you can maybe look at as you try and grow your business. I'm going to take a quick back to the Q&A at this point in time and then ask, do we have any questions or ideas at this point in time from our audience? I did see some stuff coming through as I was going on. Okay, we've got Bertie saying any similar provider, they have a big pool to draw from. Small businesses, yeah, small businesses unfortunately don't have resources in reserve. Yeah, they can be in an immediate position to take advice from anybody that could ultimately be their client. I agree with that 100%. If we are a small business, servicing a big client, is there any way that we can leverage off that relationship? That's absolutely key. How do you build resilience into innovation? That's a good question. So the way that I look at it is if we want to, last week or last year, like I said, the buzzword was innovation. Everyone was talking innovation. We are, however, now in a time where big corporates and even small corporates we can't afford to lose any more money. Our resources are tight, our skills are tight, our deadlines, everybody wants to have that cash. So before, where we could used to spend a lot of money at innovation, we don't have that anymore. So how I would build resilience into innovation is literally get as much buy-in at the design phase, where we wouldn't really talk to customers and suppliers when we're designing something. But at this stage, get them involved from the onset, because I'm sure they're also looking at ways to grow their business, and talk your ideas through with it. Have a couple of test runs before you launch. It's a lot more client interaction. It's a lot more supply interaction. It could even be regulatory interaction. Instead of innovating something and testing it in a separate environment and then launching it. The idea behind it is that you can't spend 6 months to design something, especially in the uncertain environment that we're in. You can't spend 6 months to design something only to launch it to realize, oh, the need doesn't exist anymore. So that's why the way I would build resilience into innovation is to have regular meetings all the time and involve as many stakeholders as you can. Really build that relationships, and failure is definitely an option. If we can see that something isn't working, have a line in the sand, say, this idea isn't working, was a great idea. Can we expand on it? Do we can it? Do we move on to the next one? All right. I've got, please elaborate on the phrase waterfall. Okay, so the waterfall is the typical project management way that we used to look at business, where you would have a idea phase, then you would have a design phase, you would have a building phase, you would have a testing phase, and then you'd launch. And then you kind of see how the market reacts to it. So what we're saying here is we can't wait for that waterfall. I know it's terrible. The waterfall should go up and not down, but we can't wait for that period of time before we test it. It needs to be an ongoing discussion from the design phase to the building phase, through the testing phase, to the launch phase, where we involve as many stakeholders as we possibly can in that process. What's the best way to get buy-in on your business development ideas from stakeholders? I think if we go back to maybe that slide that I said, what is business development driven by? So if we can maybe ask ourselves, how did my stakeholders previously drive this business forward? What did they look at to grow the business? And propose something that speaks to that. So if business development has typically been driven by money, your proposal to get your ideas forward needs to definitely have a budgeting component in it. There's no point in going to people who speak the language of money and say, oh, I've got this great idea. It's going to be awesome. And then they go, well, how much money are we going to make? And you go, well, oh, I'm not sure. If it was driven by values and beliefs, so if they previously would kind of grow their business through relationships, whatever ideas you put forward needs to be in that framework of, I know how much this company values relationships. I have an idea where we could really build on relationships or impact the community or things like that. So if you go to what typically drove business development, whatever idea you bring to the table needs to speak to that. I think otherwise your stakeholders, they're not really going to be that open to the ideas you bring to the table. All right, so what we can see from this is obviously business development involves a lot of things. It's not just one department that does it. There could be an overall goal, but it must be broken down in different elements. So here what we look at is there's the finance component, inflow, expenses, somebody needs to be in charge of that. Somebody needs to monitor it, and they need to be measuring what's going on. Services, whether we look at expanding our services in the case of Handy Dan, or whether they grow their services into another market by going into a tech space. Price sensitivity, somebody needs to be in charge of that. Somebody needs to be in charge of expansion and developing the ideas around services. From a marketing perspective, we need an online person. We cannot get away from that in these day and age that we live in. And then somebody that takes a hold and ownership of the connection with our people. If they want to go into developing new products and services, there needs to be a dedicated research hub or innovation hub, if you want to call it that. Somebody that actively looks for people that they can collaborate with, and somebody that actively builds networks. So all of those things, people need to assign people to do that work, and they need to know exactly what it is that they need to do, who they need to report to, how the information ties in with everything else. So it's definitely not an easy task that's up to one person. So then if we go back to growing the business, we need to be specific in our goals. So each of those sections, finance, services, customers, marketing, they'll have a specific goal. They need to have that very, very clearly. We look at what we're going to measure and how we're going to measure it. The relevance, it needs to be in line with the overall goal. So if the goal is to grow the business to pre-pandemic levels, whatever you're doing, whether it's in finance or services, whatever the case may be, it needs to be in line with that. Time, we spoke about the short intervals for meetings, so moving that discussions that used to take place every 6 months to a weekly discussion that carries on going. And then coming back to the trust element, it needs to be achievable. So the goal needs to be achievable and agreed upon. We need to have our staff to buy into this idea. So right, in summary then, when we look at business development resilience, we need to know what kind of data we need to collect. That's critical. We need to know, is it market data, is it customer data, competitor data, external data? What do we need to collect? Because we can't afford spending or wasting time on collecting data that's not relevant. We don't have the time and we don't have the money for that. So we need to be very clear, what is it that we need to know? Systems is how the systems will interact with that data. So in this case, if it's purchasing trends, anything that will influence our decision making, what are our decision-making processes and systems? When do we pull the plug on an idea? Have we set those timeframes? Are we monitoring it? Are we communicating around those timeframes? And then trust, coming back to our employees and our communities, being committed to results. Whether we're working with clients or suppliers, we all want to achieve the same thing here. Aligning it with our organizational purpose is absolutely key. Being vulnerable, sharing our weaknesses, sharing our fears to build that trust, having a healthy debate around the different options. If somebody brings an option to the table, not just shutting them down and saying, you know what, I've been in this business for 5 years, I know how it goes. In COVID, none of us know how it goes. I think really being open to having those uncomfortable conversations and healthy debates, and then empowering the people in our organizations to really come forward. If they think that there's an idea, it might not fall in our exact service line, but we can utilize skills or we can utilize assets such as warehouses, equipment, marketing tools, IT, to help bring cash into the business. So that's in summary what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that you have some ideas for your own business on how to grow it, or your own unit or your own organization. I do feel in these times businesses should really be open to how they do things and to listen to their staff. So with that, I think I am going to go back to the Q&A to see if we've got any other questions that anybody would want to ask. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to, here we go, to my Q&A. I'm still not used to the tech. We've got a question from Anonymous saying, how does this resilience compare to traditional risk management? Okay, that's quite a good question. I am working with the Institute of Risk Management South Africa at the moment, where we are addressing exactly that, to say, companies have always had risk models where they've measured the risk and they've measured the likelihood and the impact. So risk management has always been a part of normal organization. So how is this different from that? For me, it boils down to simply where risk kind of helps, or risk management helps you to mitigate the risk or the mitigation of an event or the impact that you will suffer from it. It's typically also a longer term process, whereas resilience is a conversation that happens much more regularly. And it's not just about managing or mitigating the risk, it's about actually moving through the risk. So at this point in time, we can't manage the uncertainty. We can't manage the external changes, and there's no way that we can limit the impact on our organization. If you are on a wine farm and they ban alcohol overnight, there's nothing you can do about it. So resilience respects risk, but it asks the question, how do we move through this uncertainty? How do we create structure in complexity? How do we keep people engaged without just sitting back and going, well, this risk has now happened, so now we're done. So the two are very much interlinked, but resilience is more about the continuous working towards success and working towards growth and recovery, if we can call it that. Got a question here from Bert again saying, regarding systems and processes, you mentioned monitoring. What about evaluation? I think evaluation is very much going to be, the proof in the pudding, whether we're still here in 6 months' time. I do think evaluation is key, so that when something is not going well, if we can monitor it to an extent that we need to be able to evaluate and leave the bad and continue with the good. So if there's something that's happening and we realize it's impacting one of the options that we chose, we're going to leave this option, we're going to move to the next one. That's a critical part. So many times when we do problem solving workshops, you can see a team working on a problem, but they're just going to forge ahead because they believe in it. Whereas some teams go, you know what, we've been trying this for 15 minutes. This is not the way to do it. Let's start over. And in these times, you need to be able to do that. We can't just forge ahead and make it work anymore because we don't have the cash. People, energy levels are drained. We need to really be able to change and adapt quite quickly to invigorate the business where we're going. All right, so I'm going to leave a bit more time for any other questions. Please note that the recording of this will be on our website. Recordings of the previous sessions will also be on our website. Please feel free to engage with me. I love the fact that people are engaging with me on WhatsApp and email and LinkedIn. So, you know, let us know if there's anything that you want to chat to us about. That's great. I've got one here. Are there any tools or ways in which I can measure my organizational resilience? Okay, so that's quite a nice one. At this point in time, we have developed some tools within BDO. It's pretty much surveys and it measures your resilience in the areas of data, systems and processes and trust. So these surveys at the moment, you can contact us. They're freely available because we want to get the value add out there. We want people to understand where are the gaps in their organizations and really pinpoint, you know, what are the areas they can work on. So when it comes to tools, we've got surveys. And then we've also started collecting data in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world. So we not only have the tools that can pinpoint areas where you can build resilience, but we also have case studies and learnings then that we can help organizations to achieve their resilience. We use benchmarks to see, so for benchmarks, we use high reliability organizations to see, you know, what is the minimum level that you have to have in place in these particular areas. So please feel free to contact me for that. We're more than happy to come in and do surveys in the particular areas in your organization. Got another one from Hertia going, let's see, how would you manage the current legal and regulatory environment? Yeah, that's not great. So at the moment, legal and regulatory environments are changing all the time. So how would you manage it overriding COVID regulations in contradiction to existing regulation? I'm not going to go into detail on that one right now. We do have a workshop next week where we will be specifically looking at organizational operations, operational resilience, legal, risk, regulatory frameworks. BDO is also in the fix of you know, regulatory changes that come about like every single time. So please dial in next week for that one. Sure, quite a bit of interaction today. I want to thank you really much for the interaction. I absolutely love it. As I said, please feel free to go back onto our website. The recording is there. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need. I hope that those of you that didn't do the case study with us have your business development goals. You have a bit of an action plan, and that you don't feel too overwhelmed with what we've been discussing here today. I find that if we can start with the action plan, we already have a couple of things that we can take back to work with us. Okay. All right. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the input. I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you very much.